Hey everybody, what's going on? This is Matt, and I wanted to talk about this concept of kids learning languages better than adults, and kind of maybe some of the pluses to that theory and negatives to that theory, and kind of just my own thoughts on it. So I think that a lot of this idea was really, I think, pushed by kind of this marketing campaign and by Rosetta Stone kind of a couple of years back, where it was a lot of it was like learn the natural way, learn like a kid. And it kind of put in this mind for a lot of people that that was the way to learn languages, or those were the best people that learned the language naturally. And Rosetta Stone was popular maybe like a decade ago or so, and I think it's kind of put that mindset in to a lot of people. There's also been academic research out there on the subject, and I think just from people thinking about it on a logical level, they notice that a lot of people are bilingual, trilingual, without really doing any serious language learning study. They grew up in a bilingual household, and then they've acquired both those languages naturally. And so in a lot of ways, it's like, oh, well, it makes sense. Kids are better learners than adults. Now, that being said, I think that there's a couple of things that are worth thinking about, at least in that context. So although I definitely see that clearly there's kids out there that are bilingual, they didn't really study grammar rules or any of those things, that maybe they actually just on a time basis are not more efficient than adults. In reality, actually adults have a lot of advantages over kids. So if you think about a kid that is learning a foreign language, yes, are they acquiring kind of that second language a lot more naturally and without dedicated study compared to the adult? Yeah, definitely. But I think the context is that their job as a kid is just to learn, right? As an adult, you have responsibilities, you have a job, you have things like that, and obviously your concept of time and learning is a little bit different than a kid, especially a young child who their entire job is to grow and to develop and to learn new skills and to learn the languages of their parents. And so when you think about it, maybe they're actually not optimized for language learning, right? It's like they spend 18 hours a day listening to the language because they have no basis for language at all. They just hear words and they take that in, they try to say it. And so they're almost like active, full-time language learners constantly growing up. And I think that's something important to think about, because if you think about what a lot of adults are able to accomplish and achieve, in a couple hundred hours of study, it's pretty impressive, right? Versus, a lot of these kids, even though their brain is probably not as developed as an adult, it's taking years and years to become bilingual in these languages. So if you think about it just on an hour-to-hour basis, it's not necessarily that kids are, better learners than adults, but they just have more time. Their entire job is dedicated to learning new things as a kid, and one of those things is language. I think the other thing to think about too is that, as an adult, when you're learning that foreign language, you have learned a lot of things in your life already, whether that's vocabulary words, whether that is ways to be more efficient. And so, if you put in that time learning a language, there is this kind of, there's certain things that you just have a greater knowledge of than a kid, whether that's more complex vocabulary words, an understanding about how to structure sentences more eloquently. And so there is this level of sophistication that you get in your studying of the language that the kid does not get early on, right? He might know some words and be able to communicate, but he's not able to communicate about politics per se, or even more advanced topics. Versus, as an adult, you're able to accomplish that in a lot less time because, you've already grown up, you've had that experience. I think the other thing too is that adults really have certain methods and efficiency kind of components that kids also do not have. So for example, people that are adults can read versus kind of generally a kid cannot, or is only really reading on a very elementary level. And so, as a skill set, reading is just huge for acquiring new words, for noticing grammatical structures and things like that. And so I think it's just an enormous kind of benefit in your language learning process is just to use reading as a tool to be more fluent in a foreign language. The other thing too is that you're also just able to be more efficient in the way that you approach things. You're able to find podcasts or different material to consume to get better at the language. You're able to analyze your project or your progress and see what mistakes am I making, where can I improve, and things of that nature. And by doing that, you make your progress so much quicker. So, you know, in the end of the day, right, maybe the kid speaks the language pretty well and pretty fluently, but just remember that they put a ton of time in because that is their full-time job versus, you know, it's quite impressive what adults have been able to achieve in only a couple hundred hours of study. You know, does that mean that they'll make perfect, no mistakes in their output? Maybe not, and maybe that's an advantage that the kid has. But just on a relative time basis, I think it just shows that, you know, adults are a lot more efficient than we kind of give credit for when we compare kids to that language learning acquisition style of things. So, you know, so what's the big point here? I think that you don't let this concept deter you from learning a foreign language, right? I think a lot of people, they think that they're not great at learning languages. They've passed that time. They had the opportunity when they were a kid. They're not good at learning anymore. Don't fall into that trap. You know, you have so many tools and resources available to you now, and just get started. Keep going because you can really enjoy a language and get competent with the right strategies and the right motivation. So don't get deterred from this kind of concept that, you know, you really need to be a kid to be fluent in a foreign language. Go out there, give that a shot. So let me know what you think. You know, what are your thoughts on this subject? And I'll see you in the next video. Take care.